welcome to a very special conversation here on the Next Best Picture podcast between myself, Matt Neglia, the owner, editor in chief of nextbestpicture.com, with the one and only Best Actress Predictor Extraordinaire, Josh Parham. Josh, I say this because you and I this year, we did correctly predict the Best Actress Oscar race. Was something I'm very, very proud of. Do you want to pass along that crown, that title? I'm just saying.
I mean, it was a little dicey there for a minute, but I am very happy to have that back. Yeah, that was the one category I was the most nervous about, and I'm very happy to have called it again.
So Josh and I were not on the post Oscars recap episode for Next Best Picture. As most people know, I was in attendance this year for the 97th Academy Awards, my first time ever attending the Oscars, which was a very special moment, as you can imagine, as a lifelong fan, as someone who's dedicated 10 years of their life to this site and this podcast, and it obviously having a huge impact and influence via the Oscars as far as just how they helped to guide me on my cinephile journey. They were a gateway into cinema. You know, I remember being very young and watching the show from home with mom and dad and asking questions and then going on a journey to find these nominated films. And, you know, it all just snowballs from there. And so, as Josh can attest to, many hours of going down the rabbit hole of rewatching speeches to be in the room and actually hear speeches. It's funny because you kind of get tunnel vision and you don't actually know what the complaints are until you go online and you see what everybody's complaining about because in the moment you're just enjoying it and you aren't really thinking about the details as much. So I'm happy to talk about my experience at the 97th Academy Awards, but also I want to talk with Josh about some of these winners and the outcomes and what they also mean moving forward for the industry. You know, we saw this huge, significant impact made by independent cinema, both in the live action, animated sphere, documentary, obviously, you know, mostly independent. And so this was really an Oscars that was like dominated by indies, it felt like in a major way. So, Josh, I want to ask first and foremost, where did you watch the show from this year, and what was your viewing experience like?
Well, I actually watched it from my parents' house because it was my dad's birthday this weekend. So I had family coming in. We kind of watched a little bit of it together. I was sort of off in another room actually because I take it too seriously for the rest of my family. But I would pop in every now and then to just sort of, talk about what won or anything like that. My parents also watch the shorts with me every year. So whenever those popped up, we were like, oh, that was the one that won. We didn't expect that. And that was fun. So. Yeah, it was kind of a nice environment to watch the Oscars in with my family sort of hovering around in attendance.
I kind of felt the same way too, because as everyone knows, I watch the Oscars almost like a sports match where I'm cheering when something happens that I approve, and when something happens that I don't approve. It's not like I boo or something, but you know, there's definitely like this feeling of, oh man, or whatever. And so you have all these people dressed around you in tuxedos and dresses and such, and they're all like, who the hell's this guy? You know?
A little different environment this time, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. There were two awards in particular where I audibly lost my mind and flipped out and caused maybe a little bit of a ruckus in my section. Nothing too crazy, nothing to get kicked out over or anything like that. I'm just saying, though, that I was excited. What I was not excited about, Josh, was what went wrong with the shorts this year? If you followed any conventional logic whatsoever, whether it was Gold Derby, predicted odds, listening to us over at Next Best Picture, it seems like most people only got one out of three. And
If you were
conventional,
lucky.
yeah, yeah. And so, what do you think happened this year? Like, what can you? With the three winners we had, with In the Shadow of the Cypress, The Only Girl in the Orchestra, and I'm Not a Robot, have you been able to like make sense either collectively or individually how that happened?
No. I am still baffled by it because when In the Shadow of the Cypress won, my first thought was actually, oh, does merit actually matter
I had the
now?
same
Like,
thought. Yeah.
does is it actually going to be that the movies that I like will actually win? And I thought, oh, well, does that mean Incident now is going to win documentary feature? But no, it was The Only Girl in the Orchestra, which was the conventional choice that we all assumed it was going to be. So then it kind of went back to the median again. And then I'm Not a Robot, which I don't think I saw anybody predicting that one. I saw predictions for pretty much every single other movie in that category except that one. So I have really no idea. I feel like I have gone back to the drawing board with the shorts. I don't really understand those results.
So the only thing I've been able to kind of sort of look into here is I went to our MVP film community results for the If I Were an Oscar Voter poll that we did. And two out of the three winners translated over. I'm Not a Robot won amongst the community. Now, keep in mind, this is like over 1,800 people who vote on this, and The Only Girl in the Orchestra. The community voted for, I believe it was Yuck, might have been Wander to Wonder, but it wasn't In the Shadow of the Cypress. But as you mentioned before, Josh, that also was my personal favorite of the five. So maybe there's just something to be said for, hey, you know what, moving forward, maybe we do just predict whatever ones are our favorites and hope that the Academy agrees with us.
I mean, maybe, but then how do you explain The Only Girl in the Orchestra, which was nobody's favorite?
I
I don't
really,
get it.
really think that that one stood out because the other ones were such downers. That's always been my philosophy about that one.
And I guess you can say the same thing about I'm Not a Robot. That was the one that was a little bit lighter in terms of the other movies there. It feels like all of my preconceived notions about that category are now like out the window, and I don't know what to make of the results all that much, other than being very pleasantly surprised about In the Shadow of the Cypress, because I really did love that one, and I thought it had no shot of winning.
Yeah. Dune Part 2 won the two awards we expected: sound, visual effects, deserved, and Two Towers trajectory. Like, are
It's
we
what we were
fall?
saying from the very
Yeah.
beginning, you know?
Feels like it's gonna maybe Return of the King on Messiah. No, no, no. Messiah is too crazy. I don't think it's gonna happen. But
No, no. I mean, I think that Denis Oscar is going to come one day, but it will be like with Nolan, where it's going to have to be something more conventional, just in his style. And yeah, it'll happen because obviously, when the that movie won those two awards, they shouted him out. People do respect him. They just got to do it for a project that's a little bit more tailored to the Oscars' taste.
yeah, they cut to him on camera. They even said the best director to work for. I was like, yo, nice choice of words there. Uh, we'll see. We'll see. I agree with you. I think Denny is on the Nolan trajectory where he's going to have to make something a little bit more quote unquote Oscar friendly before they do this for him, but he'll get there. I have no doubt that he will get there eventually. Emilia Perez won two of the awards that many people expected it would. Two that were actually very linked to each other because Zoe
Yeah.
Saldana performs El Mal. So those were the two awards that it won. When you think back on this award season, Josh, and you think back on just the trajectory of Emilia Perez, we saw this together at Cannes, and I think we were both in agreement where we knew that this movie would be divisive, but like we were also like, that was so wild and such a big swing. I kind of enjoyed it for how audacious it was. But then we saw, obviously, it got completely ripped apart once more people saw it. I think far greater than we ever thought it would. And then going beyond that, everything that happened with Jacques Audiard's comments, Carlos Sofia Gascon's previous tweets from her past resurfacing. This movie just had this like terrible bad cloud over it. Call it luck, call it something that it manifested itself. But regardless, it's like one of the most. It's definitely one of the most. I don't know. How do I word this delicately? It's an implosion of a campaign. I'll just say it that way. Like
Yeah.
I've never seen a campaign start off like so high and crash and burn quite like this.
Yeah, and the thing about Emilia Perez that I'm always struck by, especially since we first saw it at Cannes, is that that is a movie that I did enjoy. Like I gave it a positive review, but I was not thinking this was going to be Oscar material. I thought that this was just a weird kind of shaggy musical that was sort of fun but very messy. And I think the worst thing that happened to it was it entering the Oscar conversation. And it was not a movie that was meant to live on that pedestal. It was always going to fall under that scrutiny. So it's not surprising that people had that reaction to it. I'm shocked it got as far as it did, but I don't think it was meant to be in that space. And I think it's lucky that it got the nominations and the wins that it ended up getting.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Zoe Saldana, happy for her on a personal
Yeah,
level. So
yeah. I mean,
Camille's
I,
speech though,
uh, okay.
I didn't think that Like a Bird from Critics' Choice could be topped, but she found a way.
Bless the French. You know
Seriously.
what? She stopped Jacques Audiard from saying anything, so
That's
small
right. He
miracles.
was up there in the
Yep,
background.
he is an Oscar winner.
He is. He is. I don't know what his contributions were to the song, but he is.
Yeah, but you know what? Unfortunately, he has more Oscars than Walter Salles does.
Hmm. So yes, I'm Still Here does win the Oscar for international feature. I'm sure by now you've seen the same reaction videos I've seen in the streets of Brazil. Everyone is going crazy. It's what I wanted to see happen. I knew that it would get this kind of reception if it did, and it didn't disappoint at all. And not to mention, too, this has been a long time coming for Brazil. It's their first Oscar win ever.
Yeah.
So, that and Latvia, obviously, great nights for both the two countries to win their first Academy Awards. We'll get to that one in a little bit here. Um, I don't think that this would have happened had I'm Still Here not gotten nominated for Best Picture. And you can kind of trace that back to Fernando Torres winning the Golden Globe. So if that doesn't happen, it doesn't create this ripple effect, once again, what an incredible journey and story for this movie.
Yeah, I think that the Best Picture nomination for I'm Still Here is really the thing that catapulted it into the conversation to win international feature. There may have been a world where it still could have pulled off that very unlikely upset, but I think it needed the Best Picture nomination. And that showed you that there was significant passion for this movie. It wasn't just about Fernando Torres, it was for the movie itself. And really, this was the best outcome. Like, I know on paper it made sense for Emilia Perez to win this, but that movie has its Oscars. I think I'm Still Here has a much more significant win itself for, as you said, Brazil winning and for that movie. It worked out. I think everything is good.
Yeah, I think so as well. Do we have to look into this in the future as far as the next time we have two Best Picture nominees, even if one sweeps Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, and BAFTA? Like, I guess what I'm getting at here is like, was this a rare case where outside factors is what derailed Emilia Perez here, or do we still rely on on the stats in the future?
I think it comes down to just what the season is like. I think a sort of overview of this entire season, just in general, is a lot of it has been down to vibes.
Yeah.
There's stats we can look to, but ultimately it's just where is the passion? What are people talking about? And you kind of have to go with that to make your final determination.
And timing too. I do think that
Yes.
the LA fires and the delays in the voting certainly played a role here. It allowed people more time to catch up with more things and maybe even rethink some things. So that definitely had an impact, I would say, as well. Wicked picked up two awards, costume design, production design, both wins on a personal level made me happy, not just on merit, but for the people that were
Hmm.
rewarded as well. I'm
Yep.
sure this also meant a lot to you too.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm happy for both of those. Obviously, Paul Tazwell winning an Oscar, first black man to win in that category for costume design. Love to see that, but really, Nathan Crowley was the big one for me because I have been such a huge admirer of his for so long, and this was his seventh nomination. And to finally see him win was the highlight for me. I mentioned this, I think, on our predictions podcast, that I was pretty disconnected emotionally from most of the awards this year, but this was the one that I really, really wanted to see. And I'm so incredibly happy that Nathan Crowley has an Oscar. Long time deserved.
I had two hopes on Oscar night. Two things that I was like, if these two things happen, I don't care about anything else. I will be perfectly happy. Also, because too, everything else was like outcomes that I pretty much knew were going to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, it was I'm still here winning international feature. I just really, really wanted that for Brazil. Honestly, I would have been crushed if, and also too, would there have been riots in the streets? Who knows? But I know I just would have felt really, really bad if that had not occurred. And then No Other Land documentary. I mean, like
Yeah.
I needed that, and that pulling it out. I remember you telling me too, like you went with Porcelain War in your predictions. You were saying it was a cynical, pessimistic choice, and you were hoping to be wrong. And you were like, even if I get it wrong, I'll be so happy that No Overland pulled it off. So now that No Overland did pull it off, and you were wrong, Josh, in your prediction, are you standing by that? Are you okay with this outcome?
Oh, absolutely. I'm still very, very happy. The only regret that I have is that it prevented me from winning outright, I think, amongst our Oscar pool.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like, no, I was very, very happy to see that win happen. It was very deserved. There was clearly really no other choice, and honestly gave the best speech of the night.
Yeah. There was a few contenders for best speech of the night. I would say if you were asking me, top three would be this, Kieran Culkin, and who we'll get to in a second here, and Sean Baker's best director speech where he advocated for movie
Yes.
theaters.
The director speech for Sean Baker, especially. I did also like his editing one where he made the joke about how like I had to save this movie in the editing room. That director should be fired. Like that was also very cute and fun.
There's I actually, you know what, I was going to segue, but I want to keep on track here before we get to Anora. The Substance wins makeup and hairstyling. That is the only win for the Substance. We went from at one point thinking actress, makeup, outside chance of screenplay. Screenplay chances died once it didn't win BAFTA. Heading into tonight, most people had Demi and makeup paired. It wins makeup. That was like an award where I saw, especially on anonymous ballots, and also just talking with voters throughout the season, even if people didn't like the substance, they could not deny the makeup work. I heard that time and time and time again, like, oh, I didn't like that movie, but that makeup is extraordinary. And I'll just say, it's great that Nosferatu was also nominated here. I am ecstatic that a horror film won this category for a change.
Yeah, and you talk about the journey of this movie, like seeing this one also at Cannes, which hands down, like the most memorable movie
Yeah,
going experience I had last year. I don't
insane.
think any question about that. But like we walked out of that movie thinking like that is awesome. Academy's probably not going to touch it. Like makeup nomination if we're
If
lucky.
we're lucky. I remember
Yeah.
turning to you and saying, this should win makeup.
Yes.
And I remember like being so pessimistic, like saying, like, they'll never do this. They'll never, like, no, it's too gross.
Yeah.
There's no way.
The nomination, we were like, well, if that can happen, if we can at least get that, we'll be happy. And,
Yeah.
honestly, regardless of what happened in the other categories for that movie, to see that film get as far as it did, a Best Picture, Best Director nomination, not in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that that was possible.
No, no, I never thought it would get this far. But you know what? I remember like so distinctly saying this should contend for
Yeah.
editing, sound, director. I went down the list and saying like this was like one of those things where I don't do this often, but sometimes when I really want to fight for something, like I find like a passion project where I'm just like, I'm not going to shut up about this. I'm going to talk this movie up as much as humanly possible every week I can on this show, and hopefully somebody will listen and agree with me. And this was definitely the film where I felt very, very strongly that it needed to be considered. It didn't get all the nominations I wanted, but what it got in the end and where it ended up, it is still an incredible story. And hopefully another indication, once again, of a changing academy. So many times we talk about like how, oh, the academy will never do this. Oh, they're too stuck up for that. That's true in some cases. Like the substance isn't winning best picture, but the fact that it has a seat at the table, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Never would have happened like 10 years ago.
No, not at all.
No.
Same thing with Best Animated Feature going to Flow, beating out
Yep.
Pixar Disney with Inside Out 2, Universal DreamWorks with Wild Robot, Aardman with Wallace and Gromit, Adam Elliott
Incredible.
Memoir of a Snail. I mean, like, Gintz, man. Gintz, Zibolotis, freaking made this thing on Blender, small crew. Anybody can do this with this open source software. I'm not doing it, but there are people who are going to try. And I just think that like this is such an incredible story. I can tell you this right now. I got to LA on my trip 11 days before the Oscars. And so I was there for a long time. In the lead up to the Oscars, the word around town and all the conversations I was having with people at even just I went to one flow event, but there was like even non-flow events. People were talking about this movie. People were
Yeah.
talking about this movie in a way that I have not heard people talk about The Wild Robot all season long. And when I say this, I mean, yes, I've heard critics, people in our circles talk passionately about The Wild Robot, but when I got to LA and I heard the way that people were talking about Flow, I started to have second doubts and I was like, I need to change my prediction. But I vowed to myself that this year I would not make any changes once I locked in. And I didn't. I stuck to that and I chose Wild Robot because PGA, Annie, like Critics' Choice, like it had more stats than Flow did. Flow only had Annie Independent and Golden Globe. That was
Yep.
it. So once again, a changing academy. 20% of the academy's voting body international. Put that with a film here that doesn't have any dialogue. It transcends language. So it probably got the majority of those 20% of 20%, the 20% of
Yeah.
votes coupled along with whatever else it could. And I mean, this is just, it's a stat breaker, but it's an incredible one.
And as you said, a signal of a changing academy. And, The Wild Robot, great movie for sure. Well, maybe not to me. I'm a little cooler on the Wild Robot than other people are, but I think also just the thing with that film is you can watch it and think, yeah, this is a very good studio movie. And Flow is just this scrappy production that manages to accomplish so much with very little resources, and people get pulled into that kind of a story. I really do think so. And honestly, when I look at their nomination counts, even. I do think the fact that Flo managed to get into international feature was a major, major thing that should have been considered.
Yeah.
And even with the Wild Robot, I know people were saying like, "Oh, but it got that sound nomination." And I have actually been thinking about it more and more. And yes, that sound nomination was surprising. But one, it was like Gary Rizzo and Randy Tom who worked on that movie. And I think if we had known that, probably shouldn't have been that surprising because those are very popular sound designers. And also, it didn't get the song nomination. So the movie actually ended up getting the same amount of nominations that we all expected it to. It just replaced one for another. And we took the surprise to be more support for the movie than I think there actually was there.
I agree. Something that I did not consider that I probably should have considered was there's a good chance that because it was nominated, Flow in this case, for both international and animated feature, I know that Academy voters make time to watch the international features, or maybe in this case with Flow, they saw it was nominated in both categories and prioritized it maybe over Girl with the Needle or something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it probably got more voters to see it than not, you know? And we're also talking those who love animation are going to watch the animated feature nominees regardless, right? Flow is also a movie that Academy voters who are parents can show to their kids. It checks that box. But what it also has is it has the appeal from getting that rubber stamp of approval from places like New York Film Critics Circle, LAFCA, and so serious cinephiles who normally maybe wouldn't watch the animated films, maybe they would, but maybe just not all of them. They were willing to check it out. And so I think it was a case of it got just more eyeballs on it, maybe than even the Wild Robot did. I'm not saying that that's a proven theory here, but it's possible.
Well, it got into two feature
Right.
categories, that shows you that there was a lot of support for the movie. And as you said, it's a film that does appeal to a broad audience. Like, as good as The Wild Robot is, it does still kind of have like a kid family factor to it. And Flow is that type of movie where it can appeal to families and younger audiences, but it kind of has the artier cred to it as well. So it kind of was able to appeal to both sides of that aisle, and I think that's what really did it to get it over the finish line.
I mentioned Kieran Culkin's speech earlier. He wins supporting actor, sweeps the season, had the biggest precursor haul of any of the acting nominees this year. I believe he got 40 wins total, according to our tracking. I love this speech. I loved his performance. I understand it is a co-lead. I'm fully aware of that. It's one of
Yeah,
those things where it's like it is what it is. Can't fight it. It's happening. So
exactly.
once I accepted that, I'm perfectly okay with the win and perfectly happy for him. But I do want to just pour one out for Yuri Borisov.
Yeah,
Yeah, it reminded me of when All Quiet on the Western Front won all those BAFTAs and the lead. Oh, I can't remember his name right now, but like remember how
yeah,
he got yeah, he was the
yeah.
only
Because it
person
was
that did
it was 15 shortlists or long list mentions at BAFTA, and he got 14 nominations, and he was the only one
yeah.
that didn't get a nomination. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of felt like that for Europe, but man, he looked like he was having a blast anyway. And I saw him at the after
Oh yeah.
party. He clearly was having a great time. But Kieran, no. What'd you think of this win and what'd you think of his speech?
I mean, very expected, predicted. It was the first one of the night, so it sort of felt like they knew. Let's just
Yeah.
get this one out the way. I thought the speech was fine. I thought it was very funny and charming. It was one of my favorite speeches of the night, honestly. Like I know that people have complained about him like not taking it seriously, but I don't have a problem with that. As long as you're up there and you're being funny, like that's what you should do. And you can still communicate what it means to you while also being charming and endearing. And I thought that he did that. I really liked his speech.
The exact opposite of all the things you just said. Adrian Brody wins Best Actor
Okay.
for The
Yeah.
Brutalist. Okay. All right. Wait.
All right.
Let me say my piece first here, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
He was the best performance for me. I easily would have voted for him if I was a voter. I don't care that he already had one. I thought this performance was towering, and I am so happy that he won that, quite frankly, I don't care what he said or didn't say or how he said it once he got up there at that point. For me, it was like the right person won. Man, though, did people have lots of thoughts on this speech because it's so funny. They had more thoughts about this speech than Adrian probably had thoughts while making the speech. I
Yep.
saw a lot of people saying like, "Oh, he said so much but said so little." I think he was obviously very overwhelmed because this is a career culmination Oscar moment for him of a career that's very, like as you said in a previous episode, very up and down. So
Hmm.
I do think that like the comment about how this is kind of reigniting, restarting his career again, potentially, like I think in some way, like he's seeing this as like a second chance, if you will, to have I don't know, to have a career that he is proud of. Maybe he's not so proud. It's tough to say because, like I said, he said a lot, didn't say much. It ended with basically him saying hate sucks and let's all band together, which, good, like yes, but man, 5 minutes and 45 seconds, longest speech ever in Oscar history. I don't know if you needed to you know what it was? There was too many pauses. That was the thing. He had too many moments where he took a beat, before he said
Hmm.
something.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Trying to decide how I should go about this because I don't want to be that mean, at least on camera. Um, Let me say this first.
Okay.
I have had issues with Adrian Brody in the past, but I think that he gives an incredible performance in The Brutalist. He would not have been my particular vote, but I have no problem with that being an Oscar-winning performance based on merit alone.
Hmm.
Absolutely deserved it.
Okay.
I have had issues with the framing of his comeback narrative. And I feel like this speech really just put into all the rambling words of what I felt about his campaigning. And it felt like him getting to this moment of saying, thank you for giving me a second chance. Even though you gave me a chance already, I already have an Oscar. I kind of wasted a lot of that opportunity based on my own failings, not really recognizing that, and kind of crafting a comeback narrative that I personally had trouble finding to be a little bit sincere. And from the moment his name was called on Oscar night, when he pulled out his gum and threw it to his girlfriend, it's like, You couldn't have even had the consideration to take out your goddamn gum before you win an Academy Award? Like, that already kind of set me off. And then his
Some
speech,
people thought it was a joke about like how he was going to kiss Killian or something.
okay, sure. I did not, whatever it was, I did not find it funny or endearing, and it really soured me. I won't lie. And then he did the whole like shut the orchestra up again,
Which he did
which
back in 2002.
yeah, but at least at that time it was because he was talking about like the war in Iraq that was just starting. You know, there was more reason to say like there was something important to say instead of just going on for another 2 minutes of not saying much. Did not like that speech. Actually really, really hated it. But as I said, the performance is great. I don't have any issues there. But this has not really convinced me to like Adrian Brody all that much anymore. I will be honest about that.
That's understandable. I think it reminded me a lot of Joaquin Phoenix's speech from a couple of years ago, where it too had its like ups and downs, and a lot of people were not feeling good about it when it was over. I remember though he stuck the landing, doing that quote that his brother said at the end, and he
Yeah.
got choked up and emotional and had to like get himself off the stage at that point. Um, Yeah, Adrian just didn't do that. And like it's one of those things where I could see he was trying. I think we could all see that he was trying. But I also remember when Matthew McConaughey won, and he seemed to get lost in his speech a little bit too. But then he tied it all together with the all right, like at the end, and I was like, all
Yeah.
right, like he said the thing, let's go.
Gary Oldman was another one who kind of, I remember his speech sort of meandered a little bit, but then he ended it with, telling his mom, put the kettle on and bring an Oscar home. So, like, they all end the speeches nicely. The road to get there's a little bumpy. I would say Adrian Brody was a little bit more bumpy than others.
I preferred Anthony Hopkins' speech recorded on Instagram. It was like less than 60 seconds.
He knew how to do it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, publicist, for helping me to craft this speech. The Brutalist picks up two additional wins. Cinematography score, well deserved. Cinematography this year, man, it was a crazy race. Worthy nominees across the board here, except for Emilia Perez, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
there were other films that were not nominated, like Nickel Boys or Girl with the Needle. There was just like a lot of really good choices this year. So for a category where I remember when we were doing our predictions and we were like, man, there's more than 10 films that could theoretically like get in here. For it to be the brutalist in the end, I think it's a really cool narrative for obviously bringing back this division, what they were able to accomplish with this small budget. And Lowell Crawley too, also picking up a win is pretty neat to see. I think I've liked his work over the years, and he's not someone that I would immediately point to and be like, oh, that's a future Oscar winning cinematographer someday, just based on his previous work. But I mean, I'm not saying the work wasn't good. It was. It's just like not what they
No,
have
his
been.
filmography. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and it's also just
absolutely.
not what they've been going for in this category as of late.
Yeah, I think though that the whole Vista Vision thing probably was a huge narrative for that movie.
Yeah,
And yeah, you know, that's a movie that I feel like it won the Oscar from that very opening shot with the Statue of Liberty.
yeah,
When you create that kind of imagery right then and there from the very opening, it's hard to deny. And yeah, great win. To me, I'm an even bigger fan of the score win. I,
yeah.
I think that to me was what they picked, like clear above the competition. But that's only because Challengers wasn't nominated. But of what they got, I think, yeah, the Brutalist score was just, there's nothing that you could have picked that would have measured up to that in any regard.
I'm going to go one further than you, and I'm going to say this: I think if Challengers had been nominated, I still think the Brutalist would have beat it.
Oh, I do think that, but personally, I would not have agreed.
That's understandable. I think the Brutalist score is, yeah, no, I think it's my favorite score of the year. I
Yeah.
say think because I love the Doom Part 2 score, but obviously that also wasn't here. There's nothing that beats those blaring horns, like when he emerges from the ship, and so many other music cue moments. I think everybody also found out that Daniel Bloomberg is a bit of a freak. I mean that with all the love and sincerity in the world. I actually met him the other night, and I got to tell him how much I admired the score, how much I admired his work, because I also liked his work on The World to Come, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see like what he does moving forward from here. Because obviously now he's going to have a lot more ears listening to his work, I imagine. So Great win. Did you see those photos of him and Brady Corbet going around?
Yeah, very odd. I okay. But to be honest, like those photos are more in line with what I expect from Brady Corbet's work than what The Brutalist is. So in a way, it actually made more sense to me.
Did you see like he planted one on him when he won too? I mean, it
Yes.
was like a Halle Berry and Adrian Brody all over again.
I
I
was
was like,
like,
oh my God.
all right, the love is real with The Brutalist.
No, it was like Dune Part Two with Stellan Skarsgård and Austin Butler.
Very intense.
It was, hey, there's a lot of love and affection there, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man, it was great. Great, great, great. Okay, Conclave, adapted screenplay. It's only one of the night.
Which we talked about before the ceremony. We were thinking, like, doesn't it feel like Conclave is a movie that only wins screenplay and that's it?
I had this feeling, I really did. Something about Conclave having editing and screenplay but not winning picture was
Yeah.
not sitting right with me. And I hedged my bets and did it because BAFTA was literally the only precursor to editing that we had, and it went with Conclave. So it made logical sense in that sense. But to your point, yeah, we talked about this, you and I, offline before the ceremony, and I was having second thoughts. I thought about changing. Had I have changed though, I probably would have gone with Wicked and still would have been
Yeah.
wrong in the end.
Yeah, this is one of those categories where I mean, this is editing, not screenplay, but it's what it's indicative of what I do a lot whenever we get through a ceremony. I always go back and look at what I got wrong and think, okay, if I had to do it differently, would I have changed this vote? Like if I could get a second chance at it, would I have picked something else? And honestly, I don't think I've even would have made the switch to Anora in editing. I think that for Conclave, it still always felt like a movie that is respected, that is liked, but has a ceiling. And that movie obviously has a really great screenplay that people really do respond to, but it is like the signature thing about that film. And people like the performances, but not enough to like single one particular thing out. And if you're looking for a singular thing to award, the screenplay just makes sense.
Disappointed John Lithgow. Your thoughts?
Honestly, I wish there was more of that. I thought that
Me
was going to
too.
be like a recurring bit. I wanted to see him come back.
Me too. I actually got a chance to see him after the show, and
Mm.
I told him thank you for committing to that bit because it was one of the funniest things of the
Oh
night.
yeah.
And I told him I was like, get ready to see your face all over the internet as a meme. And then he said, "Oh, I thought that as an actor, my face was already all over the internet."
Thought you needed to explain what a meme was to him.
No, no, no. Well, maybe I don't know, but like he just had that
No, you
quick.
know what? He probably already asked that question when the conclave memes were happening. He probably already got that
Yeah.
that lesson.
What is a TikTok? You know. Oh
A
man.
fan edit? What is this?
Oh, man. Focus features. Still no best picture wins.
Yeah, came close though, must be
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. All right. So then we move on to, at this point, all of Anora's wins. We talked about editing.
Yep.
It picks up four more. Picture, director, original screenplay, best actress, which we called you and I. Man, let me tell you, I mentioned earlier to Nova Land and Walter Sally's, I'm still here picks made me happy. Being right in best actress, this was like one of the gutsiest things I
Yeah.
feel like I've done in a long time. Where like I really wrestled over this. This like hurt me so much to go out on a limb here. But stats can fail you sometimes, as they did with animated feature. Or if I had gone with stats for international and picked Emilia Perez, I would have been wrong. Those were ones where I like for flow, I should have gone based on vibes, like you were saying earlier. And same thing, I did go on vibes for No Overland, and I'm still here.
Yep.
Mikey was, to me, a stat choice. I know some people are thinking that it was more of a vibes choice. But for me, it felt like a stats choice. It really did because you look at the history of leading ladies for films that you know are winning Best Picture, and if they win either BAFTA or SAG in the lead up, they really do come along with the film then at that point. And what I didn't anticipate was I just did not anticipate that the Academy would love Nora so much that it would get five wins. Like I
Yeah.
thought four was the max.
Oh yeah, I remember predicting it to win 4 Oscars and even thinking that seems high. Like I didn't even think it was going to win that many. I just did four and being like, well, it'll probably win three out of these and then I'll be okay. But nope, it ended up doing even better than that. And
Yeah.
I think Mikey winning, it's kind of both stat and vibes
Hmm.
because like yes, obviously you could look at her BAFTA win and be like, that's great evidence to suggest that she was going to win that prize. But it also just goes to the fact that you looked at Anora and you looked at the substance, and once Demi Moore was no longer a sweeper, then it became down to the strength of the movie.
Right.
And like, yeah, you could look at stats of that just in general. You can also just look at what nominations it
But that
has,
is
what it's
that
likely
is a
to
stat
winning.
technically.
Sure. I think you can also just look at like what win package you think is going to be coming from that movie too. Like sometimes you don't know what movie what the wins are going to be at the end of the night, but you can make that guess. And this was a lesson that we all ignored last year when we
Hmm.
picked Lily Gladstone, and I was determined not to make that same mistake again.
Same.
Oscars do not care about narratives. Narratives are things that can get you nominations and they keep you in the conversation, especially online. But when it comes to voting, they care about the movie. And that it doesn't really matter all the other outside factors. It all comes down to which movie do they like more. And even though Demi Moore had a very impressive haul herself, it was very, very clear that Anora was a stronger film. And once Mikey had the BAFTA, that was sort of all I needed to say that, yeah, she was going to win because Nora was going to win Best Picture.
Yeah. If the substance was not a body horror movie, if it also one other thing I also was kind of using as a little bit of logic to try and figure this out was how it is a 50-50 movie for Moore to share the screen with Margaret Qualley. It's part of the film's theme, and so
Yeah.
I took that into consideration as well. It was a nail biter, truly, and it could have
Yep.
gone the other way. I don't appreciate the vitriol that I'm seeing hurled at Madison for this win. I gotta say in general too, like just the Anora hate post win, I think is absolutely ridiculous. Um,
Expected though, because this is how the
yeah,
internet works.
and this happens with every Best Picture winner, unless if you're Parasite, and even then, I remember some
Yeah.
right wingers also complaining about it a little bit, but like.
They tried, but didn't get very far.
No, Parasite and Oppenheimer still remain like I think the two most well-regarded Best Picture wins we've had in recent years. Because I think everybody liked Everything Everywhere All at Once in a Moment, but it's like I talked to some people about that today, and they're like, I don't know, maybe, yeah, like I still like it, but
But like 7 Oscars,
I think that was the thing. I think Everything Everywhere
yeah,
got too many was the
yeah.
issue. Yeah. But Anora, one could argue it got too many. I've talked to a lot of people who feel very bad for Demi Moore because, quite frankly, Mikey's 25 years old. She'll probably have other chances to come back someday. For Moore, this felt like it was it. And the sad part about that is that we've seen this happen before. To try and put a bit of a positive spin on this, if I can, this is someone whose expectations to even go on this awards journey were literally at the bottom of the floor. I mean, with this particular film, with the trajectory of her career, the fact that she, had commented also in her speeches about how she was told that she would never ever get an opportunity like this. Um, she wins three televised awards, an award from her peers with SAG, and she got an Oscar nomination in her early 60s at a point where, like I said, she's been told that this would never happen for her, even at the height of her career when she was this mega blockbuster star. I kind of am of the belief that this was a win, no matter how you look at it. I know that that's a hard pill to swallow in a lot of cases, but I just think considering how much this movie had to overcome, how much she's had to overcome to even be at the dance, is pretty extraordinary in and of itself.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about the journey of this film and how unlikely it seemed, and I just keep thinking about how this is a movie that ends with its lead character like as an amorphous blob with a face on it dissolving into the sidewalk. Like the fact that this performance got as close to winning an Academy Award as it did is shocking to me. And I understand it feels like so close and yet, didn't quite get it. But it's amazing that this movie had this journey. And I think that this has done so much to highlight her abilities as a performer. I think it will increase her opportunities later.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it's sad that she didn't get it because we know how much it would have meant as a part of that narrative. But considering the type of movie that it is, miracle that it happened, and I'm still so glad for this new spotlight on her that really wasn't there before.
Yeah. It'll be we'll look back on it and we'll say to ourselves, this is like Sigourney Weaver getting nominated for Aliens and like
Yeah,
how cool is that actually happened, like that sort of thing. Um So Anora, with all these wins, I gotta say, if I knew that Sean Baker was also winning editing and he wins screenplay, which, man, let me tell you, I almost, Josh, I really did almost switch to a real pain at the very, very end. I was so close, so close to doing it, and I saw Jesse before the show even and just congratulated him on and I said this to Clarence Macklin too, like just a long haul that these guys have had since their
yeah,
films have premiered. Like that is a tough journey when you have to start like at either Sundance or in Sing Sing's case the prior calendar year. Um, that's a lot. That's a lot of promotion. That's a lot of Q&As. It's a lot. And so I asked Jesse like how is he doing and like if things are going well with getting the third film off the ground. And a reoccurring theme that I'm very happy about for a lot of these guys, Brady Corbet, Clarence Macklin, Ramel Ross, Jesse, is how this whole journey and the success of all of this, whether they win or if they're just simply nominated, has made getting the next project much easier. In the case of Corbet, like
yeah,
it's all set up, it's already funded. He's already said like this process is the easiest like process for getting a film made that he's ever had. And it's going to be like some X-rated type of film that quite frankly, like he said, like under normal circumstances, I would never be
yeah.
able to get this made, but I'm
Blank
taking
check. Yeah.
taking the opportunity to get it done. Exactly. I don't know what Eisenberg's next film is, but I know it's shooting soon.
It's
And
a musical, I think he said.
oh yeah, oh you know what? Yeah. I did hear about that.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe he'll be the next director to win an original song.
And Macklin's already got his role that he's shooting in a couple of weeks, like lined up. So like that's what this is all about, right? This is
Yeah.
about not only highlighting the current work and making sure that it has like a lasting legacy that goes beyond this award season year. Because I always think about like when I was young and how I used the Oscars as a blueprint to just get like started on a cinephile journey of like seeking out films, watching films. You're part of a legacy. And
Yeah.
so Anora is part of this legacy. How does Anora feel to you, like as a Best Picture winner, and also like as a winner that gets all these awards for Sean Baker in a single evening, eclipsing Walt Disney, where he won 4 awards in one night, but they were for 4 different films. Sean Baker now the
Yeah.
only person in history, 4 awards, one film, same evening. Like that's crazy. And also like to add more craziness to it, it happened to a guy who works in the independent space that, quite frankly, I feel like, under normal circumstances, we would have thought maybe he gets like a screenplay win someday or something like that. Like this is crazy, like how much he got honored this season.
Yeah. When he won the editing Oscar, that was the one I was like, oh, they really not only like this movie, but I think really like him.
Did you have anything in the back of your mind at all, like anything that said maybe Corbet for director and Sean only wins 3?
Not at that point. No.
Okay, because I had a
No.
little bit of an
No,
inkling,
no,
like, but like, I
no.
still was. Obviously, I still predicted Sean, and I had a feeling it would still happen anyway. But like, there was a small part of me that I think it was because the Brutalist wins all happened towards the end of the evening. I started to feel that
Yeah,
way.
it won like three in a row.
Yeah, I think that's why I probably started to feel that. It was like momentum sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's sort of like the Mad Max thing, when that won all its Oscars and people were like, "Oh, is this going to win Best Picture?" And it's like, no, it just it won the awards that we all expected it to
Yeah,
win. No, when that movie won film editing, I was like, "Oh no, it's actually over." Like,
yeah.
I didn't have any issues at that point, and I think that Anora is a fascinating Best Picture winner. It to me, it first of all just represents what consensus is supposed to do with the preferential ballot. Essentially, it's the movie that has both the passion but also an agree upon base that people can be like, yeah, it's not my favorite, but I still like that movie. And you could hear it in that room too, that people still really had a lot of passion whenever it did win anything. And most of them were for Sean Baker because he accepted most of the awards that that movie won. And you could feel that the film kind of represented, as you said, that very independent spirit, as we recognize that movie that is made with love. It is not dependent on big studios and big stars. It's a bunch of people coming together, not because they're going to get rich off of it, but because they got a story to tell and they have a passion to tell it. And that's what everybody in that room wants to do. Everybody is in that industry because they love the art that they create and they want to keep making it under whatever circumstances that they can. And that message resonates with so many people. And I think in a year where it was hard to find like what particular narrative for a movie was going to settle and work, that really was the most effective. And as much as we were kind of complaining about the, follow your heart tagline that Neon was putting out, I kind of feel like it had less to do about the movie and more about the sentiment behind the movie, more about this movie represents all of the passion that goes into making cinema. And that is the thing that we want to celebrate, especially at the Oscars.
I also do think on a social level, like it does also speak to how some people are kind of feeling right now in the pursuit of the American dream, stability, success, whatever you want to like label it as, and how there's a lot of Russians who are preventing that from happening. Now,
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I understand that. I don't personally read that much into it. Like
I
I
think people are reading too much into Anora in general, honestly.
Yeah, I think Anora is just a very fine, like kind of funny character study. I mean, Red Rocket is a movie that has way more political
Yeah.
overtones to it
Oh,
than
yeah.
what Anora does. But
Hmm.
I think that the reason why Anora works is just because you love those characters and you find it to be funny and endearing and emotional at the same time. And that doesn't have to be overly political. It's a very captivating story.
That comment you just made right there was a comment that I heard throughout the season. And then when I did anonymous ballots, kept getting that feedback as well, which was this is a movie that takes you on an emotional roller coaster where there are these highs of you are happy for these characters, you're laughing with these characters, the situation is funny. Then there are moments where it's extremely tense and you don't know where the story is going. And then like the gut punch of the ending for some people on an emotional level and how it leaves you hanging at the end with those windshield wipers going. And it's like somebody described it to me as like how it was like what you want to experience when you go to the movie theater, this full spectrum of emotions. And
Hmm.
I thought about that and I was like, man, that makes perfect sense as to why it is a consensus film. Now, what I find hilarious is there's so many people now who are dissenting and saying that this movie is has always been horrible, don't understand why it wins
Okay.
screenplay, like all these comments. And all I'm gonna do is just point to the fact that there are these aggregates that exist out there. There is a Letterboxd rating. There is a Rotten Tomatoes rating. There's an IMDb rating. There's like all these things you could point to where you could say, okay, well, clearly people don't like this movie because like look at something like Emilia Perez and its Letterboxd score or something. You know what I mean? If you do not like Anora, admit that you're in the minority and stop trying to convince people that your side is the right one. Like I think that's the ridiculous thing that I'm hearing so much is like people like trying to stand by this objectivity that somehow they're on the right side about this movie and everybody else for some reason isn't. I just find that kind of grandstanding, egotistical criticism to be like just so off-putting. And I don't like I can understand having issues with the movie and I can understand not liking the movie. I get why some people don't, but what I don't understand and what I will not stand by is people trying to say, you're wrong, I'm right, come over to me. It's very, very bizarre. And I'm seeing people using it to, like, I just feel like validate their beliefs about other issues that they think the film is commenting on. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff that's going on here. And hopefully, in
Yeah.
a week or two, it all just kind of dies down and we move on because South by Southwest is right around the corner. Cannes right around the corner after that. The whole new season starts then all over again at this point because Cannes has now just become such a launch pad for award season, given how international the Academy is. And just as much as we're talking about everything everywhere all at once now, that's how much we'll be talking about Anora in a year's time. It's like these things have their peak and then they quietly like die down. And then we look back years later and we let history decide. And I mentioned the other day to somebody how you have all these Best Picture winners since the preferential ballot started, and I was looking at all the winners and thinking to myself, I wonder which of these would have lost under a plural ballot instead of preferential, you know? And it started to get me questioning like the legacy of these Best Picture winners and how history has regarded them over time. And I think with Honora, what we're gonna have to like remember most importantly is how this was an independent movie that really captured the state of where we are, not so much in terms of politically, as you mentioned earlier, but just in the state of movie making, I think, and how I think the industry wanted to support Sean and this movie um, because independent cinema is struggling more than it ever has before, where people are not going to the movie theaters anymore. And if they are going to movie theaters, they're not going to see these movies. And we're in real danger of these movies. I will not say completely disappearing, but like definitely they're so hard to make now. Everyone talks about how every movie's a miracle, every movie's struggling to get financing. And so I would hope and I pray that the success of this is not just a fluke, and hopefully it leads to uh, a wider discussion about how these projects can be financed. I think Cord Jefferson, last year in his speech did a great job talking about this issue. Brady Corbet, I know people have their issues with him, but he spoke very passionately about this all season as well. And listen, the guy's been obviously burned by this industry. So I clearly understand where he's coming from and why he says it the way he says it. But then you have people like Ramel Ross, Sean Baker, the list goes on and on. So that was like when I look back on the year itself and I look back on this award season, like for me, it's like that was the takeaway was how the Hollywood strikes, COVID, LA fires, like all these external factors are all like coming into, I mean, our divided political times as well. Like all these things
Yeah.
are preventing people from being able to go to the movies and see, yes, all movies in general, but specifically independent cinema.
And Sean Baker summed that up very beautifully in his speeches, particularly his director speeches, as we had mentioned. And I do think that's going to be the overall feeling about the season is just really appreciating cinema, but indie cinema in particular, and how vital it is, and how that's really where so much passionate storytelling has come from these days. And in terms of people talking about like, oh, now Anora is a bad Best Picture winner or whatever. The only thing that I would really say to that is a piece of art does not need to completely align with your own personal politics for you to engage with it. You know, I do find it very annoying when people watch something and they think like, oh, this character is saying something that I don't agree with, or there's a kind of mentality here that I am bristling up against. And I think it is important that we watch stuff that sometimes challenges us. It doesn't have to be objectionable or reprehensible. We can have limits. But I think also recognizing that there is a wide range of storytelling and characters that we can explore. And I think it is important to see that and not just think that just because somebody is talking about a subject that you don't agree with 100%, that means that it's invalid. And there is a lot of that goes online that I really, really do not like. You don't have to love everything about Honora. You can even question some things about its politics if you want. But I don't think it just having that there then ultimately means that it is not worthy of discussion and discovery. And I hope that if Honora's Best Picture win can get more people to engage with that kind of art, then I think that is also another win in its column.
Yeah, well said. All right, I've got some questions for you as we get to the end here. Let's see if you have any questions for me as well. My first question is, what was your least favorite aspect of the night outside of the winners themselves?
Hmm. My least favorite aspect probably will surprise you, but it was the Bond thing.
I'm not surprised because, quite
Yeah.
frankly, Josh, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
Like the choreography, and I don't know why Margaret Qualley was there, but like it was cool to see her do it and
Yeah.
engage with it. But like the whole thing was pointless. It really, to me, it felt like it was an extension of the In Memoriam and saying goodbye to the
Yeah.
James Bond that we once knew. Now that
Kind of felt like it. Yep.
leadership has passed over. I mean, Conan had that one funny speech of who's going to be the next James Bond. It was like the senior vice president of sales of like Amazon or something. That was really funny.
Yeah, sure, it
But
was a good joke, but like as you said, it was felt so pointless. Like, why
yeah.
are we doing this? Especially since we just had the 60th anniversary special a couple years ago, which I hated that. I didn't think it was well produced, but like if this had been a part of that ceremony, and then we got like this medley of Bond themes that led into a Billie Eilish No Time to Die performance, that would have made sense. But here, it's like we're just wasting time. Like, what
Yeah.
are we doing this for? And yeah, I'm glad to always hear a Bond theme, but context matters. And I did not like it. It really was one of the low points of the evening. Not to mention also that I did also just feel sad that it's like this is ending. And the only thing that I not enjoyed but got a kick out of was that when they presented the clip package of all the Bond movies. One of them that they showed was a movie that the Broccoli's did not produce. So found that to be very funny. And I don't know who allowed that to happen, but very humorous that, yes, them celebrating the Barbara Broccoli, Michael G. Wilson Bond movies, and they have one that their company did not produce and is actually a knockoff.
Yeah, that was definitely not a highlight for me either. But before I get to my next question, do you have anything for me?
I mean, just generally speaking, watching the Oscars from the actual auditorium is, of course, like extremely different and is a perspective that most of us don't get. And I always sort of wonder, like, what is the like one expectation that you kind of had going in, that you had based on from watching the Oscars previously just at home? Like, what was so dramatically different that gave you kind of a new insight onto how this whole production is done?
I thought I would see more cameras. Yes, there are moments where you
Hmm.
see guys with the cameras like go up on the stage to get like a close up or something like that. I don't know why, but for some reason I expected to see like cranes and like things like that. I thought to myself like I feel like I should see more cameras. It felt like I was watching a Broadway production where no matter what seat you sat from in the auditorium, you still were getting a show. Like these musical numbers, and I was way up there. I was on the third mezzanine, okay? So like I was like in one of the worst possible seats. Wasn't even in the center. I was like off to the right.
And you were
Um,
there though.
I was there, yeah. And what I realized about the Dolby Theater based on that was you could literally sit anywhere and still have a good view of the stage. They also have
Hmm.
monitors literally everywhere. So no matter what
Yeah.
angle you're facing, you can see how the show looks as it's broadcast.
Okay.
With
Yeah.
the edits and the shot selections and so on and so forth. So you could choose to look at the stage if you want, like those if you were, like at a concert, you want to pay attention to what's happening right there in front of you. Most of the time, your eyes go to the monitor, to be honest. Maybe because that is how we are so used to watching
Yeah.
it.
Sure.
So, um, but yeah, I expected to see more of a production element. And I was really surprised at how much I actually didn't see. Maybe it's because a lot of it's happening, just backstage. But really, the things that I saw that you would not see is the intimidating clock when they're coming back from
Mm.
commercial break to signify to
Mm.
everybody they have to get back
Yeah.
to their seats. It plays on like the biggest screen on the stage, so it's like so visible that everyone can see it. And it's a countdown, so it's like, and then Nick Offerman's voice announcing it, like, we are coming back from commercial in 30 seconds. And it was like, oh, damn, all right, everyone's got to move.
All right. So
Um,
all those people that were in the front that scatter back to their seats when the commercials end, they don't have any excuse. They knew it was coming.
Yeah, basically, there is warning. And then what's really fascinating is when people can't get back to their seats, I was like paying attention to the seat fillers then.
Yeah.
Everyone talks all the time about seat fillers and how they have to get into a seat. It was wild to watch them at work. and see them like jump into somebody's seat if they needed to. Obviously, the Adam Sandler bit was another one where it's like I saw him walk in because how do you not notice that there's someone wearing
Yeah.
a blue hoodie, no matter where you're sitting from? That really stands out a
Yeah.
lot. And I was like, this has to be part of the bit, but I didn't know it was Adam Sandler. You can't tell.
Yeah.
So there was still like some fun moments like that. Or during one of the commercial breaks, I actually thought this was part of the broadcast. Coleman Domingo like got the audience to like start dancing at one
I
point.
heard, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. Coleman Domingo's having a blast. He's got a drink up on stage. He's getting everybody like dancing a little bit, and I was like, this is so sweet and so fun. And then I found out it wasn't part of the broadcast. So that was just something that they were just doing during a commercial break, I guess, to loosen the audience up a little bit. So yeah, there was moments like that. But there was never like any kind of announcement over to the speaker about like any technical issues or calling anyone to come fix something that you would hear or anything like that. It has to be all happening like backstage. That was everything too. Like all the set changes, very seamless. I thought I would
Yeah.
see like more commotion, people running in the background and stuff. Like I said, it was like watching theater where the sets change and you don't see the people pulling the strings.
Mm.
It was really cool. I would say acoustically, that was very interesting. I like you could hear it, but when the crowd would laugh hysterically at something or react really loudly, sometimes then it was a little hard to hear over that a bit. Um, but otherwise, I mean, yeah, like it was pretty wild. Like it was
Mm.
surreal, and there was a part of me that I'm not saying I regret going. I don't. I can't believe like how honored I was to be a part of it. Um, but there was a part of me that had to like kind of like adjust, because
Yeah.
I'm so used to seeing it a certain way that
And that's how they produce that show. Like it
right,
is a show made for television. It's
right.
meant for the people out there watching it, not necessarily for those in the room.
And you start to wonder, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so watching it later, like on the clips on YouTube and seeing like how it all was presented to people that saw it from home, I was like, oh wow, like that is pretty amazing. But nothing would top the actual goosebumps and chills that I got, like being in the room when you hear Cynthia and Ariana doing Defying
Yeah.
Gravity, or even the In Memoriam segment, which I understand people had issues with the song choice.
Yeah.
I get it. I still got chills like during it
Yeah.
because like the live element of it, has that effect on you.
Yeah, for sure. And the kind of audience reaction was actually something else I wanted to ask about. What was the moment that you felt like had the most like elation from the crowd? And what was something that you could like feel there was a chill that the audience just wasn't into? Like, and it couldn't have been, just a win or just maybe a joke or something like, because obviously that's something that we can't see at home. So like you can only experience that from the room.
hmm So this might surprise some people. I don't know, but the loudest ovation I could personally hear was Zoe Saldana winning.
Mm,
I just got the sense that there was like just so much love in the room for her. At least in my section. But like I could hear it. Like I could hear it in terms of like the loudness of the whole crowd. And then I saw she got a standing ovation, and I was like, okay, well, this is all
yeah.
making sense. When Conan made the Carlos Sofia Gascon publicist joke, that had some people like looking at people like looking at the person
Mm.
like next to them like you know like
That's
like
his
he
best joke, though.
it was so good, so good. And then the second one that got that reaction where people were like, oh my god, like was when they got the heroes of the LA Fires to do that
Mm.
Joker 2
Oh
joke.
yeah,
Oh my god, that was savage and so brutal. Audible gasps and lots of laughter from everybody. Um, I'm trying to think if there was like another like loud ovation moment. I can tell you this: I was yelling during No Overland, and I got tunnel vision. I don't know if
yeah,
other people were cheering. Because I had people ask me like, "Oh, were people like not clapping because it's No Overland?"
yeah.
And I was like, "I don't know." I was just so locked in to how
Yeah.
I was feeling in that moment. I went back and watched it later, and I watched like their walk down the aisle, and I was trying to see like who's clapping, who's not clapping, you know.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and you hope that you don't hear heckling or something like that. The only moment of heckling that I remember was everyone seemed to think it was Adrian Brody's partner, Georgina. It wasn't. It was actually somebody up in the mezzanine who yelled
Mm,
out for Judy Becker to get
mm,
recognized in his speech.
mm.
So that was the only moment of like actual heckling during a speech that I heard all evening.
Um,
I wouldn't even call it heckling so much, but
yeah,
yeah.
but that plays a lot different when you're in the room than, when you're watching it, it's just like somebody said something off camera. I don't know where that is or what's going on. And I mean, there's still confusion, I'm sure, when you're in the room, but at least you can figure out like sort of where it's coming from. And
Yeah.
it's just a different perspective, which is fascinating.
And somebody was saying to me too, like, oh, you should get up during the show and go down to the bar because so many people go
Yeah,
to
that's
the,
what everybody says.
yep, they go to the bar during commercials or when their category is over and they know the camera's probably not cutting back to them for the rest of the evening. And I thought about it, but I got to tell you, man, like when I got to my seat, there was just a part of me that was like, I don't need to pee or nothing. I'm gonna just sit here the whole time. Even during the commercial breaks, I sat there the whole time. I did not move, not once. I think because I really wanted to just soak it all in as much as I could.
Especially your first time too.
Right. And I also like I had access to all the levels. Like I could have gone down to the lower level bar and maybe seen some big people, whatever. That really wasn't a concern for me. That was not a priority. Some people talked it up like, "Oh, you're gonna have the opportunity to do this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but if I end up missing the show, or if I miss something important that happens
Yeah.
on the show, like I'm sorry, I'm too much of a fan for that. That is more important to me." And yeah, basically, I don't know specifically, but I was told like the audio is not as good in the
Yeah.
area for that. They do have it playing on the monitors, but like, if you're socializing at that point, so it's like you are gonna miss something.
Yeah, that's like to figure out how many awards are into the show before you need to get back. Like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
not really meant for watching the show. It's a different experience. And I can absolutely imagine that if you're there to see who's going to win and what the atmosphere is like, you want to be a part of that, not necessarily what's happening in the bar when people are kind of checked out of the ceremony.
absolutely. And the just like when they close the doors, like in Venice, when the screening starts. They
Yeah.
also close the doors, when the show starts. So if you're not back in your seat by the time they come back from commercial, you have to wait until the next commercial.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can pretty much get to the bar and stay trapped at the bar all evening if you want to. The only food that was being distributed was prior to the show starting. They were going around with some finger food, but then they had like popcorn everywhere. So otherwise, there really wasn't
Yeah.
much food.
Those people aren't eating anyway. They've
No.
starved themselves so much to just get into their dresses and outfits. Like, yeah, they're not even eating anyway.
Yeah. All right. My next question for you, because I feel like I divulged too much information, is I asked you your least favorite bit outside of the winners. What was your favorite bit outside of the winners?
I I did really like what Conan did.
Yeah,
I
me
thought that
too.
he was a really, really good host. And he did the thing that I expected him to do, which was to strike the real great balance of, making fun of the nominees and the movies and all that, but not making it seem like there was just open resentment for having to do the job in the first place,
Yeah,
which, I do think Jimmy Kimmel gets a little bit too much hate at times, but I won't admit or I won't deny that that's, a part of his kind of shtick too. And it was nice that Conan did seem to have some actual reverence for the things that were there. It didn't really feel like it was mean-spirited at all. I loved his I Won't Waste Your Time musical number. I thought that was brilliant. Classic Conan. And yeah, I don't know if he's gonna come back to host, but I would welcome it. I thought he did a really, really good job.
supposedly, from what I heard, he was being approached at the governor's ball by the ABC executives, and I think they've already said publicly in interviews that they like him and they would love for him to return. He's been well reviewed, which I've seen, which is not a usual occurrence for the Oscar
Yep.
host. So that's got to
One reason
help.
why they don't do it often.
Right, but that's got I imagine that's got to help his ego a little bit to wanting to maybe say yes again if they decide to do it. I know he's what, 62 years old,
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
But
Yeah.
he could definitely do this for a couple more years, I'm sure. And I think that, he's got the energy of a freaking teenager. I mean, like that opening bit of him coming out of Demi Moore in The Substance was so good. Whoever came up with that idea, that was perfect. I almost wish they had done more things like that of him,
Yeah.
right? But, it reminded me because the musical number, the making fun of the nominees, but then turning it on himself a little bit as well. Like this all reminded me a lot of the best bits of Billy Crystal,
Hmm.
who we also got to see on the stage that night.
Yeah.
Oh, that was lovely. Another fantastic Best Picture announcement of not,
I did think of you. It's like, oh, that's more editing work that Matt has to do.
but like I just love that nobody can just say the name. It's like it
Nope.
reminded me of like okay, Coda. It's like this time it was oh, Anora. Like I was like
And also, like, they made a comment about the drum roll
yes.
too. It's like it can't ever just be, and the Oscar goes to the movie. Like, they can't all be Jane Fonda.
My eyes see Oppenheimer though.
It is gonna be a shame to lose that, I have
Yeah.
to say.
I'm gonna miss that. I'm gonna miss that
It's always
terribly.
bittersweet when we get a new Best Picture winner because it means that the old intro is no longer there anymore.
It's true. It's true. All right. Anything else?
I mean, I'm glad that the season's over.
Me, me too.
It's been a long, long season, really has. And I like the winners overall, though. I will at least say that. You don't always get to say that at the end of an Oscar night, but I do think, for the most part, very good, very deserving wins. Not everything I would have picked, but I can't really complain. I
Yeah.
think most of the results were decent, but I'm also glad to now start talking about new movies.
Yep, I'm feeling the exact same way. I'm ready to put it behind us at this point. And, you know, in terms of the winners themselves, like I don't know, maybe because I just like too many movies. I don't know. But like I was perfectly fine with them and I'm very happy, all things considered. Anora was my number three favorite film of the year. That might as well be a number one for me, seeing as how much I love usually my top tens in general. So I'm perfectly okay with it. Do I think Sean Baker needed to win four? Not necessarily. Am I happy for him regardless? Absolutely. Same thing with Neon, another Palme d'Or winner, another Best Picture win, pretty remarkable for an independent studio such as this that doesn't make movies over the budget of like $30 million. I mean,
Yeah.
really, really great stuff what they're doing over there. I guess, like I was saying earlier, like, this is going to be a study for us in terms of the international voting body of the Academy and their behaviors moving
Hmm.
forward. I think we're also going to have to take into effect as well, like a lot of circumstances for the campaigns and how they can be derailed, how they can be strengthened based on, as we were saying before, vibes. This is not just a pure stats game anymore. And I know a lot of people love to come to us for stats, and I know they love to listen to our in-depth conversations pertaining to stats. That's all well and good, but I think this season was a great learning lesson for the next one and seeing where that goes from here. Um, it's always really remarkable when you get to the end and you think about like how chaotic it was just a few weeks ago, like post nominations, trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. And just imagine we could have had a world where it was, Emilia Perez winning Best Picture. And it's
Yeah.
amazing
Count your
how,
blessings, people.
like, it's just amazing how quickly things could change.
Yep.
And I think it's
That one
hilarious.
weekend in February, it was like there was before the Anora weekend, and then there was after.
Well, that was what I was going to say. Isn't it like amazing how when we look at our consensus predictions, Anora was the front runner. We had that at number one. I think maybe went back and forth between that and the Brutalist a little bit. But then it goes to Conclave, and I was starting to think we were looking really, really smart,
Yeah.
for having Conclave out as early as we did. And then that weekend, like you said, that PGA DGA weekend, it just all changed from there. So it's been a roller coaster, But like Thanos, we ended up right back where we started. Uh,
And a good ending though, because like I really do think that I think about all the winners, and it's like I don't think there's a bad win. There's not one win this year that I'm like, ugh, I really don't like that. Even if it's nothing that I would have picked,
yeah.
it's all like kind of okay, which is extremely rare for any Oscar season.
Yeah, and I know some people will still point to, the category fraud, the supporting categories.
I'm
They'll,
sorry, people. You got to get over it. Like, there's another thing I'm going to say. I am so sick of category fraud discourse. I'm sorry. I know people get passionate about it. I don't care. I really don't. Like,
mm,
it's a thing of the industry. This is not the first instance of it happening. It won't be the last. This has been happening since literally like the golden age of Hollywood. I don't know. I just can't get that mad about it anymore. Like, yes, I'm upset sometimes, but get over it, people. Like, come on.
that's where I'm at. Like I call it out when I see it because we should call it out when we
Yeah.
see it. But to harp on it and to let it get you bent out of shape, maybe some people feel like, oh, if I like let show that it's bothering me, people will act upon it because they don't want me to be bothered. I don't know. Like, but to your point, Josh, I think whatever we can do to just reduce negativity, that's got to be the positive moving forward.
Yeah. Like, would I prefer it if those two performances that won supporting weren't in that category? Yes. But am I gonna get bent out of shape of it? No.
All right, man. Any other final thoughts? I think we're at the end here, so
I am just happy that I got Best Actress right.
King.
I just needed that. And you know what? This will be the final thing is that really when it comes to like trying to figure out who's going to win that category, there really is no secret formula that I have. It really has always come down to what is the stronger movie. That is how you could have predicted Olivia Colman. That's how you could have predicted Frances McDormand. And honestly, that's how you would have predicted Emma Stone last year, which is the thing that I didn't do. It really just comes down to that. And when you're in a bind, it's not a sweeper. Just go with that logic and you'll probably be right. So if there's any like big lesson to take, always go with the movie that just has the more love and passion behind it.
And I also want to state something else too that I think is a big learn, not just from this season with Emilia Perez having 13 nominations and how that could signify, but they love that movie more. But then I look at something like Elvis and the Whale and how Elvis
Hmm.
had 8 nominations and the Whale only had three and didn't have a Best Picture nomination. Brendan Fraser was still able to win in that season. Getting nominations are an entirely different
Yep.
ball game than voting on the winners themselves because the nominations you got to remember something. Not everyone votes on the nominations themselves. Like there's lower voter turnout when voting for the
Hmm.
nominations. More voters will turn out to vote on the winners. So I think this is very, very important because just because your film gets a ton of nominations doesn't mean that it is still the most beloved film by the Academy voters. And that can be very, very tough to figure out because we rely on the nominations to kind of tell us some clues into all this.
Yeah.
But really what you have to really look at is you really have to look at a film's reception. What are people saying about it? You got to talk to voters and hear anecdotally like what they're thinking as well and try to put these pieces together as best as you can. I mean, with The Whale, we constantly heard about how Brendan Fraser was making people cry. And that was a case where they bought into the comeback narrative. The Substance was not making people cry. There was a comeback
Mm.
narrative or whatever narrative you want to ascribe to
Yeah.
Demi Moore's trajectory here. But The Substance was a tough sell of a movie for a lot of people. There were people who didn't watch it. There were people who watched it and didn't watch the final 20 minutes. There were people who were disgusted by it, and sat through the whole thing. So uh, this does matter, when discussing these things. So keep your ear to the ground. And Josh, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at JR Parham.
And you can find me at Next Best Picture. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to Josh and I here on the Next Best Picture podcast. You can subscribe to us anywhere where you subscribe to podcasts. Be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Let us know what you think of the show. We really appreciate your feedback and your support. As always, we are part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Like and subscribe. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you all so much for listening as always, and we will see you all next time.